Welcome to the Playwrights Realm community programming. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to go through some essential information before we get started. Captions for this session have been enabled, so feel free to turn them on if needed. The Realm has an ongoing commitment to being an equitable, inclusive, anti-oppressive, and anti-racist organization. More information on our mission and values is available on our website. Those values extend to this virtual space. If at any time you experience something that is not in alignment with those values, please email us. If you incurred any caregiving costs to attend this webinar, you can get a reimbursement through our Radical Parent Inclusion Project. You'll receive a link to submit your request in the follow-up email to this event. Please submit questions for the panelists in the Q&A window. If there's time, the panelists will answer it at the end. If you see a question you also want answered, you can upvote it. If you have any technical issues or need to communicate an access need with the group, please do so in the chat. Enjoy today's session and stay tuned for upcoming programming.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel, Making the Most Out of Your OPT. I am Danilo Gambini. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am a director originally from São Paulo, Brazil. I want to start acknowledging that the Realm is located on the traditional unceded territories of the Lenape, and colonization is an ongoing process that continues to impact the lives and lands of Native communities. In addition to the physical lands that we occupy today, the platforms, technology, and equipment that we are using consume resources that are based on physical lands and are not universally accessible to all peoples and communities. We will share a link for those who would like to learn more about the spaces that we occupy. And before we begin, we want to clarify that the purpose of this panel is to give overall information about optional practical training, OPT. And nothing we say constitutes legal advice and might not apply to every case. And to know specifics about your individual situation, please contact the office in your school that handles international students. We have some students here from Yale today, so I'm happy to report that Erin Gustafsson from Yale's Office of International Students and Scholars is also in attendance. So any specific questions the Yale students have can be directed to her. I also want to welcome viewers from HowlRound.com. This panel is also streaming on their platform, so happy to have you here. And now I will introduce our wonderful panelists. I'm going to start with Ntokozo Fuzunina Kunene, who is a freelance costume and production designer from South Africa. Hello. Lily Hong, Director of Career Development from the New York University Tisch School of the Arts. Hi. And Kevin Dyer, who's an immigration lawyer practicing in New York at Dyer Harris LLP, representing artists and investors. Hello. Yes. Okay. I see you. Turn your camera on, Kevin.
Will do. There we go.
Hello. So just as a reminder, we will be taking questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of everyone's screen, and we will answer as many as we can at the end of our panel. Okay. So just for us to start at the beginning, I would like just to send this question for our panelists. What is OPT, optional practical training, and when and how it can be used?
Okay, let me start with some preliminary remarks. OPT is normally a one-year period of employment authorization that occurs at the end of a conclusion of a course of study in F1 status. Sometimes that period that ends is a formal degree, and sometimes it's not. The employment authorization is limited to the particular field of study that led up to the OPT. With STEM degrees and the scope of STEM degrees seems to be expanding. With STEM degrees, the operative total period can be 3 years of employment authorization. Okay, that's how I would summarize what OPT is.
Mm-hmm. Great. Cool. So I think an important question is, okay, like during this period, what types of work, and this is like for all people in, arts and specifically theater, mostly what types of work should I be looking for during this extended period of time that I'm allowed to work, OPT, that are the most valuable for my next steps as staying in the United States. So the O1 visa or like the next steps. And this can go to all the panelists.
Right. I mean, let me start off, and then I'll defer to my panelists, co-panelists here. I mean, first of all, let's start from a premise that underlies the O1 visa category, that the USCIS is looking for people in the arts who have lived their careers publicly with public recognition and have played central roles, important roles in distinguished productions or for critical roles for distinguished organizations or groups. Let's start with that. And then and then I get into a kind of a mechanical thing is I know very well what an O1 petition requires. And then I work backward to kind of urge people in OPT to take on projects that would meet those requirements.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll defer to some other people that have actually gone through this process about what they found most helpful. I don't want to dominate the discussion here with kind of a lawyer's approach to all this.
I think a lawyer's approach is great, but also I would love to hear from Ntokozo, like what was your process for your OPT and how that went for you?
Absolutely.
Sure. So I think it sounds, it might sound scary and daunting when you've just graduated to think, how am I going to find myself in, a lead role in any kind of production. And obviously I think also when we graduate, we'd all like to catapult into, immediately into like fame and doing all of the, either the acting or the directing or the designing. But what I found, the things that I did firstly, was I think from graduating, one of the most helpful things was just hitting up all the directors and designers and like theaters, like just sending cold call emails to all of those people that I really wanted to work with, that I found some sort of commonality with, to see if they have any work available. So so I think then it also meant that it wasn't necessarily looking for a lead role, because it's also about like rethinking how you use those situations. So whether it was then finding maybe a shopping position. So for example, I ended up working for the public theater quite a lot. So I had like this trajectory with them where I started interning while I was still studying on a production. Then once I graduated, I worked as a shopper that then at least got me noticed by the people working there, that then eventually allowed me to design some productions for the public theater that then helped, right? So I think it's not necessarily approaching it from I need to design, or I need to be, the lead actor in a situation, but just sort of like finding ways that help you with a network that then will help you with things like getting the recommendation letters, right? Because obviously we'll probably get into the minutia of the things that you need, but getting, the recommendation letters, the deal memos, or I'm not sure what they're termed correctly, but I knew them as deal memos when I was doing my first application, because I'm actually now in the process of renewing mine. So the things that will get you the deal memos, which is, finding directors that are willing to say they would work with you for the next 3 years, or theaters that will also say that they're willing to work with you for the next 3 years. Of course, yes, you would love to design. And so the other thing that I would say is, we are living in slightly different times, but one of the things that I did was also not to to undervalue some situations. So it is difficult because obviously, yes, you want to get paid and be in situations that have like all of the resources. But I did then take some jobs that weren't necessarily like the best paying, or, again, had all of the resources but like at theaters that at least were recognized, so at least then I did have some lead role situations there. So yeah, that's just like some of the stuff that that I did, was not just focusing on getting the design things, but other jobs that led me into finding connections that would then help towards all of that.
Wonderful. Lily, do you want to contribute with us? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to reinforce that strategy, because in the reality of what it is to start your career, regardless of whether or not you're an international student on OPT or somebody who is just starting out your career in general, when you graduate, even though the dream would be, let's start immediately get a lead role, the reality is that you need to also think about how you are building your reputation and your connections within the industry. So taking on internships or assistant roles is the natural way to begin. And also the thing that I thought was really interesting that had been mentioned was it wasn't just I went on to Playbill jobs and looked at the listings and just applied to everything. To approach it in a multi-pronged way, to yes, certainly go online, look at those job boards, look at those listings and apply for them, but to also think about how can you network and build a network that way, then allows you to spread the possibilities of casting your net wide. That's the phrase that I was looking for. Because also not only will those smaller jobs lead to the bigger opportunities, it's all about relationships. Ultimately in the arts is very collaborative. And so even though you're initially starting out as the PA or the shopper or whatever, the fact is that you are demonstrating your reliability, the way that you approach the world and work to people who will then potentially hire you down the road or recommend you for opportunities. Another thing that we often will encourage people to do in the career counseling that we provide through my office is not only to take jobs where you might be assisting somebody, but also potentially take opportunities where you can understand the way that the artistic decisions are made. So any kind of opportunity where you can observe the decision-making process when a team is being hired, when a director is selected, or if you're an actor to, let's say, do an internship in a casting office. Because even though you ultimately want to be that lead performer, it's important to understand how does a casting director or the creative team assess a performance to say, hey, you're the perfect person. We do want to cast you in the lead, which will then lead to that credit that will help you get your O1. So looking at it all of it from a kind of holistic standpoint, as opposed to just throw my applications out and hope for the best, is a really important thing to consider when you're starting this process.
Yeah. I want to just like take my like facilitator hat off a little bit and just also share a bit of my journey. And I just want to share for those who are in the panel that feel overwhelmed or like the sense of anxiety. This is always how I felt. I went like during my time through the panels just to try understand, and it always like I got home and I was like really stressed and anxious and would cry a little bit because it is stressful. So you know, I see you, I've been there, but at the same time, a wonderful thing that I found is that people are willing to help. It is a very vulnerable position that we are, right? Because as we were saying, we are looking for relationships, and of course we're coming out of school and we want to work because we want to work. We don't want to work to get a credit to be able to stay, right? So I want to like develop a relationship that is real, not a relationship that is like a relationship that, oh, I'm only establishing a relationship with you because I know that I'm going to be able to get a credit, whatever. So it is a vulnerable, complicated space. But what I learned is when you are open and you explain the position that you are, most people are willing to, if they don't know, to learn and to help you, because it is actually based on like your will to work, to do art, to collaborate with community and to build your career. So even though like this might feel overwhelming, also try and find a little bit of calm and peace in the fact that you can talk to people and ask for help and support. And if some people are not willing to, it's also fine. There are many people around you that will certainly help you out with it. I want to follow up a little bit because we touched on this, on the other aspects that like all, not other, but like all the aspects that involve a O1 petition that we should be looking for, right? We were talking about finding jobs and gigs in our areas, but there are other specificities too that I would love to, that y'all to like could explain a little bit more.
I'll start off. Oh, you know, I tell people in the O1 context, we have to do three major things. One is document your past career in a certain way that satisfies the immigration requirements. Two is show your relationship with a U.S. Sponsor or petitioner. And those can be a variety of relationships with breathtaking variety. And three is document your future. And, you know, we frequently advise people coming off OPT that with your petitioner or sponsor, it's nice when the sponsor is someone or a group or an organization in your world who has achievements in your world, and the fact that they will associate with you on this petition adds a certain validity and strength to your petition. When it's possible, we tend to recommend that. We also tell people, be the historian of your own career, down to the details. If you're in film, track your films, what film festivals they go. If you're in any line of work in the arts, keep track of the work you're proudest of. All the press related to it, where you've played an important role or a significant role. Even if the credit isn't all that you might hope it would be, the work that you're proudest of may form the nucleus of your O1 petition. But let me defer to my other panelists on what their thoughts are on the things you should be doing.
Yeah, I was going to say with regards to that, like being the historian of your career is also that your achievements from your home country also help. So, you know, you probably, I think whether you're in undergrad or like grad school, maybe you've worked prior to that or have done some things of note back at home. So, you know, all of that stuff does count towards it. And I think also just something that Danilo mentioned earlier about the people being willing to help. I think also when you're at school, right? You're coming out of there, so use your professors to use the alumni as another resource. You know, whether that's like again getting jobs, recommendation letters, things like that. Just don't forget that as like the first point of resource that you have. Yeah, I think just as a reminder that it's not just the stuff that you've done maybe now that you've been in the US press-wise, but yeah, stuff that you've done prior to coming, because you know, especially the grad students who probably had a whole career before you came to the country. So don't forget those achievements.
I think it's also important to remember that in thinking about the work that you've done, something that we see often is we have undergraduates who say, how am I ever going to qualify for the O1? I don't have a lot of credits. I'm currently a student. Is that going to count? And we remind them that as students who are artists that are constantly creating work in class, you can take that work and then push it out into the world so that it becomes seen by the greater industry. It's no longer, let's say, that short film that you made for your advanced, intermediate, whatever, even though it was a short that you made for class. If it's a good short, you can be submitting it to film festivals. I mean, don't necessarily, and Kevin, you can speak on sort of the different ways that the credentialing works, but if your short film is accepted into the comedy roster for a film festival, that could be one of your credits. So it's not like you're making additional things after you graduate, you're just taking work that you've already done and pushing it out into the industry so it then gets recognized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that I can say too, one change of adjustment of mindset that we all have to go through as immigrants in this country is that, okay, this has to be somehow in the back of our minds. So if you can give an interview that quotes your name, it's great. Or if any of the work that you've done has any repercussion in the press, you do save it and keep it on a folder. I have since I moved here, because I had a friend who helped me from the very beginning, like a reviews folder, and I would put everything that was written anywhere I was putting in this folder. So it was a little bit easier when it came time to actually find the reviews that were going to my case, that I already sort of had it there, and I didn't have to spend that much time actually tracking myself down online. I think like a few things that we kind of like schemed over that I would like to like just take a moment to fully explain it are the deal memos. What are they and what they constitute?
Okay, I'll give you the basic lawyer's view. The deal memo is a document that expresses an intention by parties to engage you as an artist in a whole variety of genres. And so the purpose of the deal memo is to basically set out the engagement, the time frame, what services you'll be providing, what is the context, is there a working title for the production. These deal memos are also referred to as letters of intent or letters of engagement. They are sort of quasi-contractual, although I've never seen anyone sue on these documents. But they serve for the immigration service to give them an idea that you are going to be busy for a certain period of time, hopefully the full 3 years that we can apply for. And we try to use the deal memos to also show that your role will be important and that the production will be distinguished. And we try to back that up with other factors. But that's my take on deal memos. Other people may have a slightly different one.
I think we can give maybe examples of the deal memos that we had individually, if it's helpful. I don't know.
Sure. I think, well, again, I'm in the process of renewing my visa. I have been for the past 2 years. But I think if I remember correctly, what I did previously was that I spoke to the directors that I'd worked with that year. That was some of it, just for them to say that they would be willing to work with me. And then again, the theaters that I'd worked with. And I think also as a younger, I'm going to speak specifically as a designer, but as a younger designer, the other thing that is helpful is that I think a lot of the universities want to work with designers that have just come out of who've just graduated. And so that also is helpful because they know about the process. So I think a lot of those, I remember, I think I got one from Brown University, had been worked with their MFA people in my OPT. They were willing to give me a deal memo. So yeah, I think it's just, I think that was, and then obviously like the theaters. So again, I established this relationship with the public. I don't think I had designed for them yet during my OPT, but I'd established this relationship with them. And so they were also willing to write my deal memos. So it's partly that establishing those relationships, and then they're willing to say, yes, we would like to hire you. I'm not sure the detail to which the deal memos have to be now. But yeah, I think a lot of people, again, like what Danilo said, a lot of people you'd be surprised are actually willing to help and say that they're willing to work with you in the next 3 years.
Yeah, I can give an example. Like I had a teaching gig lined up at Quinnipiac University, also including directing opportunities. So that entered my deal memo, and also as a directing fellow at Rattlesnake Theater, that also entered my deal memo. But I also, like as a director, have signed deal memos for designers who would work for me, which they did already. So like things that actually came to fruition. There is one question, Kevin, that already appeared, just a little bit of clarification around quasi-contractual. What does this means and entails?
Well, first of all, a lot of people, when they consult with us, they say, well, we can just make this up, right? And the answer is absolutely not. It has to be in good faith. It has to represent what the parties anticipate is going to happen for the future. And so it's fairly detailed language, not as detailed as an American contract would be, But it does specify where services are going to be provided by the artist, the nature of those services, any compensation if applicable, what's the name of the production, the working title, sometimes who else will be involved. And so these are fairly detailed documents. Now, things happen in the future. Sometimes a project documented in a deal memo doesn't happen at some point for reasons that people couldn't anticipate, but it was signed in good faith. These are all useful in an O1 context, and there's no blame if it doesn't come to pass for objective reasons. But these things have to be signed seriously and in good faith.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you.
Sure.
So I think another aspect of it that it would be great for us to have more clarity is on the petitioner aspect of it. What is a petitioner? Who can be? Can I have this process without a petitioner? All things petitioner related.
Okay, let me start, and then I'll defer. Let's talk about the basic requirements for a petitioner for an O1. It has to be a U.S. citizen, a U.S. green card holder, or a U.S.-based company. That being said, there are a variety of relationships that one can have with a petitioner, or I use petitioner and sponsor. They're synonyms. They mean exactly the same thing. There could be a petitioner that is a theater group that will employ you full time. That's not very common, but it's possible. That's the way other work visas are set up, like H-1B and the others. An exclusive relationship with a petitioner who is also the exclusive employer. With O1s, you could have a relationship with your petitioner that would be a collaboration from time to time in the future. And in addition, the petitioner would be actually signing the petition in part on behalf of those independent projects that would be documented in deal memos, where those other parties in those independent projects would designate the party who is going to be the petitioner to file the petition in part on their behalf. So what it ends up being that the petitioner can also be a stand-in for a constellation of future employers that will employ you as an artist. It is also possible to have a petitioner that will not collaborate with you at all. Doesn't add anything. It's just a US citizen or green card holder. And in that regard, that kind of petitioner is simply that designee of your future projects. And all of those future projects would designate this petitioner to file the petition in part on their behalf. So those are just a sample. There's other kinds of petitioners where the petitioner is acting as your agent. We see this with like fashion photographers and things like that, where that petitioner actually directs the artist where to go on which days. But those are sort of the major relationships that are depicted when we talk about a petitioner. On a practical level, as people starting out in your careers, coming off OPT, a little boost from somebody prominent in your field, or a film production company or a theater group that is prominent in your field adds a certain glory to your petition, and helps the narrative. So with that, I'll turn it over to other people for real life experience.
Okay, so so my first application, I think also something I probably want to mention now before later is that is also choosing your lawyers very carefully when when doing this application. So yeah, my first application, my sponsor was and somebody who I met on a production. They were an actor in a production, but then they had they have a film production company. So that person ended up being my sponsor. with the intention that we were going to possibly work on some projects in the future, but time just wasn't a thing. It just didn't happen. So yeah. Again, it seems all very daunting and scary, but yeah, I think it's just, don't be afraid to ask, anyone that you've worked with. Yeah, second time around now, but it's like I've been working. I graduated in 2016. And so yeah, second time around now, like after having worked like the 4 or 5 years or so, I've now managed to secure an agent, and so they will become my sponsor. But yeah, first time around, maybe you'll be lucky enough. This happens sometimes. You might be able to sign an agent first, and then that's actually I think that's one of the better ways, because inevitably they will be helping you with securing your work moving forward. The other thing, that Danilo mentioned, is that he got a teaching position. I also got a teaching position. So I could have used them as my sponsors, because I potentially was supposed to be at that university for the 3 years. But I think in terms of the nature of the kind of work that I wanted to do, that, I really did want to do more of the design work. I wanted to do both, but I really wanted my focus to be on the design work. And I felt that if I went with the university as my sponsor, it would sort of limit, my allowance to then to be a freelance designer. So yeah, so just any opportunity that you get that, like, again, will potentially help you with those, with the 3 years, don't be afraid to ask. And then if you are lucky enough, to then secure an agent, even better, because they will make sure that you then just you still get the work, but there is some sort, there is just like a level of support that does come with having an agent.
For those who are gonna go ask for people or institutions to be their sponsors, what does it entail on their end, of the petitioner and sponsors end? What is their responsibility?
We have to answer this question all the time. Because particularly for first-time sponsors, they get nervous and wonder what they're signing on for. They start with questions like, if the artist commits a crime, am I responsible? And the answer is no. If the artist runs up credit card debts and defaults on them, am I responsible as the sponsor? The answer is no. What the petitioner or sponsor is responsible for is everything that we're saying about the petitioner and the petitioner's relationship to the artist must be true. Everything we're saying about the artist's career should be true to the best of the petitioner's knowledge. Those are really the points of responsibility for the petitioner. I guess with one final exception, whatever deal memo or whatever collaborating relationship we're describing between the petitioner and the artist should also be true, and they should live up to that. But most people are concerned as petitioners, am I getting sucked into some hidden responsibility? And the answer is no. Everything is transparent and rather obvious in terms of their responsibilities. I also tell petitioners that with that as a backdrop, it is not the most pressing responsibility they will ever take on. The petitioner will receive some mail from the Immigration Service. They will collaborate with the artist in a way that is depicted in the petition, and that's basically it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's this one question I think it just fits. So how willing are the agents to take on the sponsorship, or would they be willing to work with someone that doesn't come with that baggage? I don't know if anyone has an opinion on this. Ntokozo, do you have an opinion?
I don't think, sorry, just take on baggage. I mean, I don't think you are baggage, because at the end of the day, firstly, the whole point of like the 01 rights is that it's the exceptional talent. So the US just wants to take anybody that is going to contribute to their name. So so it's the same with your agents. You know, they'll just take on anyone that they won't just take on anyone. But the point is they are, you know, they are probably just as invested in your career as you are, because it helps them. So yeah, there's no baggage. There's no difference between being a US citizen or being an international person. The only thing with my agencies, because they are US based, is that they just want to make sure that I'm working in the territories that they exist in, right? So which is the US and England, or on productions. So right now I'm back in South Africa. So my agency just wants to make sure that I'm working on you know, productions that are like international productions. So like there's a lot of film and TV that is shot here in South Africa. So they just want to make sure that I'm doing something that will contribute to that. So no, there's no baggage, there's no worries. And again, like I think if you do have an agent right now, and like you know, like a good agent, I'm sure they really would love to help you and stuff. So don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah,
it only helps them.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I would say that if an agent see who you are as a problem or as a baggage, that is not the correct agent for you, right? I feel like that's also what I want to echo of what Ntokozo said. If an agent is someone who is working with you, also somehow a little bit for you, but you're partners in professional partners. So if someone sees you being an international artist as a problem, the problem is in this relationship that shouldn't be in place. This is my opinion. I think there's one important question that we should discuss too, is when should I apply for my O1 during the OPT? What is the correct time? What is the correct timeline? Also with COVID and all the things. So, you know, yeah.
Okay. I do want to jump in here because I was thinking about this, even though I applied pre-COVID the first time, because now I'm reapplying. But I think something that like I feel like I neglected my time through that, because you obviously get really busy as any freelance artist. You know, you're working 24/7, and so you feel like you don't have time. So I was thinking about this, what could have made it easier, and what could have probably have made my process easier now too, is that I feel like I should have just set aside some time once a week or something, just to, you know, gather the things or send out an email, just to say to myself, okay, on a Sunday morning, I'm going to spend an hour just doing this first part of, you know, of the application, to then just make sure, you know, by the end of, or by the time the deadline is set, because I think maybe Kevin will probably be able to say more on how much actual time you need, but by the time the deadline is set, I have put all of that stuff together. And yeah, I think I need to do that now too, is just say to myself, you know, because I'm working obviously with Daya Harris, and so they've outlined everything so well for me that I feel like I could just say to myself, okay, this Sunday I'm going to just work on sending out my emails to get my recommendation letters, and then okay, done that, like then the following Sunday I'm going to just work on getting my deal memos, then that kind of stuff. So I would just say, if you can just like set aside the time, and so that it becomes less of a burden, and then you know that then you've accomplished some parts by the end of a month, or by the end of 6 months and stuff.
I would say this, for artists on OPT, you're getting stronger with every day that goes by. So the longer we could wait to prepare and file your petition, the better off you'll be and your lawyer will be. Sometimes there are economic imperatives. People come to us and say, my OPT expires July 15, and I need to be able to work legally July 16, and I want to work legally in 01. And that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on the entire process. People who can take advantage of the 60-day grace period following OPT, where you cannot work legally, but you can remain in the United States. You can work with a lawyer to prepare the petition. Sometimes it makes the difference between a more complete petition and a less complete petition. It takes the lawyer, I think it varies, but it can take 8 weeks, 10 weeks, even more sometimes to prepare a petition. These are voluminous petitions, and a lot of work goes into them. So the longer we can defer on when we file, the better off the artist is.
So just so we have like an estimate, like you say, like it can take up to 10 weeks to prepare the case, and after the case is filed, how long usually does it take?
If this were 5 years ago, I could give you a better prediction about how long the Immigration Service takes to adjudicate an O1. If you've got a West Coast sponsor and it goes out to California, I think they give themselves up to 6 months to decide the case without premium processing. On the East Coast, the Vermont Service Center tends to be quicker, and so sometimes it can be somewhere between 1 and 3 months with regular processing. Sometimes things drag on more. The Immigration Service, you have to understand right now, is going through a crisis. I think it went through a crisis during the Trump years, and that crisis has continued because of COVID and become worse. And it's recovering now, I think, but it's not entirely well yet. And so there are serious delays in this process. And we'd like to avoid premium processing for cases that are not the strongest, because the Immigration Service can have a reaction of just sending out questions called a request for evidence. And so we'd like to avoid premium processing with OPT cases.
Yeah, thank you. We mentioned 3 things that I just want to make sure that we explain thoroughly, which is the premium processing, the request for evidence, and the 60-day period grace period. So if we could just, these are things that like all of us that went through the O1 are very familiar with, but I want to make sure that we just talk about them all.
But I'm doing way too much talking here, and I don't mean to dominate. But if you want me to, I will.
Okay. So like one thing also that I want to bring Lily to our conversation too, and this is a question, which is, how do you choose a lawyer, or do you choose a lawyer, or what are your opinions on that? To go with a lawyer, and how to choose if you do decide to go.
Okay, should I answer? Okay, so I mean, I went to NYU, so after this, I think clearly should answer. But so I think the first time around, and this is why I'm saying it's so important. The first time around, because I'm from South Africa, a bunch of my South African friends had used some lawyer, and I was like, great, let me just go with that person because they've got their O1s through this person. Yeah, it was not necessarily the best idea. We all had a bit of a traumatic experience. Some of them were renewing at that time. So when NYU or your university suggests lawyers, they've done the vetting, they've done all of that. So probably you should stick to the ones that they suggest. Like I'm saying now, I'm with Daya Harris. I think mainly I found out about them through Clint Ramos, who's also NYU alum. And it does make all of the difference. You will want to, obviously, I mean, it's like Kevin had mentioned that, you know, obviously some people might have like some financial constraints and things like that. So you might be thinking, oh, let me take the shortcut because, yeah, maybe from a financial thing, but that's not necessarily always the best thing. So really just, you know, try to vet your lawyers as much as possible. Because it shouldn't be like it is like quite a huge process. It does feel daunting. And so, you know, your lawyers make it seem less stressful. And I'll admit that that's been what's been happening with me now, especially with all of the travel bans and all of the stuff like happening, I feel like, you know, that's always communicated to all of us, not this to me specifically. You know, every time something happens, there's an email that goes out. But also whenever I just have a specific question or something, you know, April is always willing to have a Zoom call with me. So I think that's important. If you need somebody who is going to, just form some sort of emotional support for you, then you probably want to like really think through who you want to work with. But then obviously, yes, financial constraints might not allow you to just choose anybody, but do consider going with who your universities suggest.
Yeah, we get this question a lot at the career office. Since we provide career counseling services, and the way that we approach it is a very holistic thing. It's not just look at my resume and help me find an internship. We do advise on the O1 process and the petitions and how to pick a lawyer. We have a list of immigration lawyers that specialize in artist visas who we know have successfully petitioned on the behalf of Tisch alums. And so Kevin and April here are on the list. We have a couple of other services as well. But when we share this list with international students who request it, we always make a point of saying, don't just pick the person at the top of the list alphabetically. Make sure that you are doing your consultations, because it's not just has this person effectively petitioned for O1s in the past. Do they understand who you are, what your case is, what your credentials are? Do you feel like they understand how to frame your qualifications to say that you are an artist of extraordinary ability? Just because someone has a petition in the past also doesn't mean that the type of artists they're petitioning for are the same as you. Maybe they've only ever done it for classical musicians and you're an actor, or you're a photographer. And so maybe even though they know how to argue it for musicians, they might not understand all the nuances of what a photographer or an actor does. And, you know, also there again is that emotional question of like, how are they supporting you through this process? Do you feel like there's somebody who gets you and can hold your hand through it? One of the other things that we provide in my office is, in addition to that list of lawyers, we have a short list of alums who have gone through the process themselves. And so we have, you know, for any student who requests it, we can put them in touch with an alum who may potentially have been the same major. And so they can also talk about not just their experiences of how they decided what lawyer to go with, but also what they did on OPT, things like that. Because when you are getting recommendations, it's always really important to contextualize who's giving you that referral to that lawyer. I mean, we certainly have other firms on our radar, and we're trying to like add more as we find out about it. But it is really important that it is somebody who gets you and gets how to explain who you are for the government.
Mm-hmm. I want to share that Erin Gustafsson said that Yale also has a list of attorneys that have worked within artists with O1 that they share with their students. And I feel like schools and colleges usually do have a list that students should, you know, go through. But also, Lily, this a question? Do you also advise them to have like a first meeting with the lawyers? What is the best way to feel if, okay, how do I know to actually gather this information?
So yeah, to have that first meeting, lawyers generally will offer a consultation, and some of them will do it for a small fee, or they'll do it for a fee. But then if you do wind up working with that lawyer, that fee then gets rolled into what your actual fee would be if you hired them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, having that first conversation is going to be the here's my background. This is what I've done. Do you even think I qualify? How do you generally work with your clients? And I think a good lawyer will be also honest with the person. So if you haven't really done much, a good lawyer will say, you know, right now, based on your past experience and your credits, it might be challenging for us to successfully petition for you. And then they may then give recommendations on things that the client can do, or that you can do to beef up your application.
Great, thank you. I want to make sure that we cover some of the technical terms that we went through. If we can just go, what does premium processing mean?
Premium processing is a quick decision from the Immigration Service They'll give you a decision or a response, I should say, within 15 days of filing, with an extra fee now of $2,500. They don't always say yes or no within that 15 days. Sometimes they ask questions, which is called a request for evidence, or RFE, which is a term we throw around, where they say, just not feeling it, please provide additional information on these points, A, B, C, and D. Sometimes they can be rather detailed. Sometimes they can be not thought through completely, or maybe they didn't really even read the petition. These are all the risks with premium processing and the pressure that the Immigration Service gets under when you've selected that.
Mm-hmm. Great. And just this grace period that you said post, yeah.
Yeah, grace period. It's actually a function of being F1, that your F1 status ends at the end of your OPT period, and that you have 60 days to, I think the immigration apparatus has in mind that you'll hug everyone goodbye and leave the United States. But during that 60 days, you can also remain in the United States. You can meet with lawyers. You cannot work for money. But you could plan and file a petition, like an O1 petition, during that time.
Great, thank you. I am already getting to the questions, but I'm gonna get select one, two. There's one from Camila for Ntokozo and myself. What was, I think you already talked about this, right? Like how you chose your lawyers, right? And then I feel like it's a joint question is like, do you feel that you need a lawyer? Do you think that you do need a lawyer, or can you do it by yourself? And then what is your opinion? And also Lily, of course. Kevin, I think I know your opinion, but feel free to join.
I would say no, you can't do it by yourself. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't even consider whether you could or couldn't. But when I went through the process, especially the first time, because I felt like I was alone, given who my lawyer was. Don't worry, that person is no longer practicing, so you won't have to worry about coming across that name. But yeah, I think it's imperative to have a lawyer, because there's a lot of, I mean, we've just heard a bunch of technical terms already, so it's probably best just to find somebody that will work well with you. And again, as far as the fit, I mean, like Lily just touched on that, probably that first meeting that you have will tell you, I guess, like choosing a therapist, will tell you whether or not, because you'll be with that person for a few months working on this.
Lily, like, do you, like, if someone comes with you with that question, what is usually your advice?
Get a lawyer. It's just too complicated, and there are too many ways that you can mess it up if you're not familiar with the process. Because it really is about how are you packaging and explaining your credentials to the government. And if you don't know how the folks in Vermont or the other centers are reading it, whereas a lawyer, because they're petitioning on a regular basis for their clients, not only do they know the technical aspects of it, they're also familiar with how the government is reading it in terms of trends, how strict they are in interpretation of your credits to qualify to be an artist of extraordinary ability. So it's money, but it is a good investment. That said, I do know that there are alums that have successfully petitioned without lawyers. Honestly, no idea how they did it. I can think of like one person off the top of my head who said she did it. She hasn't explained it to me yet. I'm really curious to know how, but we generally will tell everybody who asks us this, do it. It is worth the money. It is an investment in your future. So it's worth that.
Yeah, it is. For me, the experience was the same. I don't think I could endure emotionally going through this by myself. I do have a friend that did it herself, and she was successful. But I was like, I am not. It feels like a personal decision. I feel like the thing is like it is possible, but you just have to make sure you analyze thoroughly the stakes of it for you, and how much you can actually handle while having to deal with everything else in life. I feel like that there is one question about how much money would the lawyers averagely be, and I think that I can safely say that it wildly varies. So I don't think we are able to say any number here, because any number that we say will be incorrect. So I think the best way that you can have this answer is asking individually for people who went through this, and each office, each practitioner has a different set of fees. They are just very different from one another. There is this question about the grace period. Can you work for free or volunteer while you are on a grace period?
I would definitely defer to Lily on this one, and say, what do you advise students on OPT grace period?
Actually, I would defer to you because it seems more like a technical legal
No.
thing.
Oh, the thing is, I think that you're allowed to volunteer as long as in the process of volunteering, you're not taking a paying job away from an American. As a practical matter, I don't know who's looking at this, or but as far as I have a default setting that if it's a short engagement and you're just, no money is changing hands, it seems harmless to me. But I think other lawyers can take more conservative views than I do towards that.
Yeah, I mean, we typically encourage everyone to be conservative in how they are interpreting these things. And so our rule of thumb is, does it smell like a job that would be paid? If it does, then maybe if you're really paranoid, don't do it. But if it is clearly a volunteer thing, let's say you and your friends have decided to do a commedia piece in the park and no one's getting paid, it's just you and friends making some theater together, then that seems like it would be fine.
And another clarification for this grace period: once the 60 days is over, and if you still do not have an approval, what does it mean?
The key concept isn't whether you have an approval, because once you file a petition, you can remain in the United States while it's pending. So the key thing is get it filed during that 60-day period. And then once you do that, then you can remain. Again, you can't work legally until you get an O1 approval, but you can remain in the United States while the petition is pending.
Great. I feel like we are approaching the end. I feel like we can sneak in another question, but for the credits on your application, is it only for paid gigs, or things that you didn't get paid for also count towards an O1 application?
Unpaid engagements can also count. The Immigration Service is either wise or oblivious about the concept of artists making money. So unpaid gigs count equally.
Great, thank you. I just want to also broadcast that Yale, this is from Aaron Gustafsson, would advise Yale students that they should have a great deal of caution about volunteering. If it is truly volunteer and no one else is getting paid for the same role, it may be okay. And the advice is that public attendees is to check with their school DSO and perhaps also an attorney before making any of these decisions. Like Lily said, if it smells like a job, it's probably not the right moment for that opportunity. And I feel like the overall advice is just to be cautious. I feel like for all of us who are here, like in this process, the stakes are high. So we want to be very conservative in all of our decisions. This is my personal opinion. I just want to give a little bit of space for the final remarks from our panelists.
I'll go. In terms of thinking about O1, I always encourage international students to start thinking about it early. One of the challenges that we tend to see is that we will see students in their final year at school, maybe with only one semester left, coming to us and saying, I've got OPT coming up. I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I know that after OPT is over, I'm hoping to continue to work in the US. I'd like to get sponsored. How does this work? And actually, the first thing that we end up having to explain to them is that as students or artists, the likelihood of them getting sponsored in the same way that their friends who are majoring in finance or tech, it's a different visa. A lot of people don't realize the difference between the H-1B and the O-1. And so that is the first thing that we talk to them about. But then the other thing that we want people to understand is that if you do want to have a successful petition, the more credits that you can show, the more effective your application will be. So the bottom line is plan early. Start thinking about this early. Don't wait until your OPT is about to start. Don't wait until your final semester in school. If there are any first-year freshmen here, it is never too early to think about this. Even if you change your mind, you decide that after 2 years of acting school, you actually want to be a computer programmer, that's cool. But at least start thinking about it now and start engaging in the industry and finding ways to get your work out into the world so that you will have those credits and you will have the things that you can include in your application when the time comes. It's never too late to start thinking about it.
Thank you. And Takozo, do you want to?
Sure. Agree with Lily about just thinking about it early, but I think also just be kind to yourself during this process, because I think you are going to don't start putting too much pressure on yourself because you're thinking about lead roles and doing all of this stuff. Just really be kind to yourself and really think about like your trajectory, your career trajectory, as you would had you not had to apply for this visa. So be kind to yourself, be patient to yourself. It is daunting, but but it works out in the end. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Kevin?
I would add one thought. OPT is a very short period of time, and you could take a number of attitudes towards it. One is to say, oh my God, I have to accomplish all of this or I'll die. And that's the wrong approach. Your life is long, your career is long. OPT is 1 year of it. If it can help you get an O1, all to the good. If it's necessary at the end of your OPT year to return to your home country and continue working, some young people find that to be a defeat. It is not a defeat. It is just another stage of your career. And so you have to embrace that, knowing that your engagements that you could pursue in your home country, in whatever artistic endeavor is yours, can contribute to your eventual O1. Nothing is lost. Nothing is lost. And so if you have to do that, it is not a defeat. And so I urge people to kind of also view the immigration service not as their enemy, not as their adversary, but as a pushy stage parent who wants them to be out there and to pursue their dreams. And when you get evidence of having realized some of those dreams, that's what an O1 petition is. And so the Immigration Service wants something for you that is actually good for your career. And if you have to go to your home country, I say this again because so many people need to hear this. If you have to go back to your home country, all to the good. You can work there without a visa and build up in a short period of time the components for an O1. Okay, those are my thoughts. As well, before I forget to say thank you, Danilo, and our fellow panelists and the Playwrights Realm for the chance to talk to everyone this afternoon.
Thank you. And I will wrap this up. Thanking you so much it was wonderful to just share this space with all of you. Thank you, Playwrights Realm, for hosting us. And thank you so much, all attendees who joined us. And I hope this helped make this very anxious time and situation a little bit lighter. Thank you so much, everyone. And this is it for our panel today.
No cigarette in the waiting room, only chairs and magazines, and a printed stack of papers that the calendar says you should read.